Welcome back, everyone. Now that we created our domain models, we could go to our second piece of the models in MVC in Spring, which is the repositories. The repositories are how we're going to query the information from our database. So it's going to be pretty much our template to save, retrieve, any type of query that we want to do with our tables. To create a repository, we also need to create a package. So let's create a package called repositories, because we might have more than one repository. Now, in this package, we're going to create an interface. So it's not a class, it's an interface, and we're going to call it book repository. Awesome. So this book repository interface, the first thing that we need to do is annotate it with the repository annotation. This will tell Spring that this is a repository, and that's how it manages the dependencies for us. So let me try to import let me try doing it again. Repository. There we go. The second thing that we need to do is extend from the CRUD repository. And I'll explain what the CRUD repository is in just a second. And the types are our model, which is the book model, and the primary key type, which is long. So we have the repository and the book. So remember that this type right here, long, is also the type of our ID. Perfect. So what is the CRUD repository? So the CRUD repository will allow us to pretty much do all CRUD operations, or all query that involve reading objects, creating objects, and deleting objects and updating objects. So as it is right now, we have all CRUD operations available to us. In the next section, obviously, with the services, that's how we're going to call it. But I want to go a little deeper here and show you guys how we could write custom queries that follow a certain format. So how JPA works is that it creates queries behind the scenes for us depending on the method signature. So let me write an example here. I'm going to have a method that's going to return all the books. And the name of the method is just find all. Just by writing this, JPA will create a query that does a select all from the books table for me. And now I have this method available, which I could use to call later to retrieve all the books, for example. Now, it gets a little confusing, and it takes a little bit of trial and error to find out what methods and what keywords you could use to write the right queries. So I want to go over the documentation with you. If you go to the useful links at the bottom, there is the documentation for JPA. And I want you to search query creation. That will give you a good examples of what JPA uses to create queries. So in 2.4 you see query creation, and in 3.3 you see query methods and also query creation. Now this is a good example of how JPA uses the method signature to retrieve the right query. So this will return a list of the person that the email address and last name match. Just by writing the method name, it finds that it writes the query for us behind the scenes and finds that person for us. Now, if I go to the other query creation, this is actually the most useful table. It gives you a bunch of examples of how to write them. So find by last name and first name, this is kind of how the SQL query will look like. And this is what I want you guys to use to practice how to write queries. So in the platform below, I give you a couple more examples. So for example, if I want to find a book with a specific description, right, I could find a book by description containing whatever string the user passes in their search, right? I could also write other things by count by title containing, or delete by title starting with. So this is JPA. In the next section, we're going to learn how to use these methods by implementing services.